Hello audience. In this video we're working on the truck. At the moment I don't really have much of a plan. It's got a few problems and I've bought a lot of extra parts for it over the years, so I'm going to try and sort through as much of it as I can. One of the biggest problems this had was the radiator, which I've mentioned in previous videos. It had the wrong one on it, it was falling apart, it was mounted incorrectly, and just causing a lot of problems. Well, as you can see, I've since fixed that. So I'm going to bring it back to the way it was and reenact it to show you what was going on. So where do I start with this? Well, let's start with the basics. Now this thing is pretty much a piece together, which most Model Ts usually are, but this is more of the 17 to 22 series or 17 to 23 series, depending on how you look at it. Now this is what replaced the brass era. They had a taller radiator, it had a sheet metal radiator shell, it also had a different hood, different firewall. This is also when they introduced the rounded fenders, because the earlier ones were flat. And this was used through sometime during 1923. Now this is what's commonly referred to as the low hood or low radiator configuration. Why is it called low? Is because the later ones were higher. Now sometime during 1923, and I'm not entirely sure when, that's an argument I don't want to get into, but sometime during then, they changed the front clip around a little bit. The radiator was slightly higher, slightly wider, and so is the hood and so is the firewall. And everything else, the hood shelves, the fenders, those are all slightly changed to accommodate that. Now on this, pretty much everything on here is for the low hood, except the radiator. That's for a high hood. I know that because I borrowed a 24 radiator shell, set it on here, and it fits it perfectly. Now these changes are pretty subtle, and looking at them in individual pieces, if you're not an expert on this stuff, it can get difficult to tell exactly what you have and what's going to work together. And if you try just throwing random stuff together, you can have problems with fitting everything and not be able to figure out why. And that's what I've been going through for a few years with this, trying to sort out what it is. So this is actually higher than the firewall that's on this now. So it had a 17 to 22 hood, which they removed the hood sides and then just kind of bent it around a little bit to fit on here. It also had an early radiator shell that was butchered really bad to fit this, which I've since restored that. Now this is actually some kind of aftermarket radiator, I presume, because it's a honeycomb core, which I don't think Ford ever used those. Now, you know how you go to an auto parts store and they have an aisle full of cheap aftermarket stuff you can stick on your car to make it look more expensive? Well, they had that back in the 20s also. That's probably what this is, some kind of aftermarket radiator made to make the car look more expensive. Now, this was already falling apart when I first got the truck, but it's gotten a lot worse. This brace is completely detached. I have it zip tied on. It's also supposed to be soldered around the bottom. That's all detached. This one is still holding, but it's starting to crack open. Also, the tank has got a few leaks in it. It's been soldered in a few places. The JB weld in the Ultra Gray is what I've done. Soldering is probably from a previous owner. Also, there's this. I don't know what's going on with that. In spite of all those problems, this is actually a pretty good radiator. I mean, the core doesn't leak. It does transfer enough heat to keep it under control. I drove this on the national tour last year, going around winding mountain roads at wide open throttle a lot of the time, and it never even tried to overheat. If this were the correct series radiator for this, I would actually probably just restore it and reuse it, because it is a pretty neat aftermarket accessory. And I'm going to save it anyway, just because it's still good. But since it is the wrong one for this, it has to go. Now this is a low radiator. It's an original that looks like it's still got the original core in it. Now, compared to the other one, you notice the height difference? Yeah, neither can I. And apparently neither can the person who installed this. You kind of actually need a tape measure to tell the difference between them. Now, one difference that they do have that I notice at a glance is on the low radiator, the radiator shell fits really snug over it, and it's held on with the same bolts that hold the radiator on. Now the high hoods, the radiator shell fits a lot more loose, and it's got separate brackets on the side of the radiator that the shell attached to. This one doesn't have them, but at a glance we can see where they used to be. Now this is the radiator that I plan on using, which is the one you already saw on it. Like I said, original with the original core, and I've had a few miles on it and it does work, so I'm going to clean it up a little more, paint it, and put it on there permanently. Generally, if I can use an original radiator with the original core still in it, I will, because everything is still the original OEM specifications, and generally, an original radiator shell will fit right on it, an original hood, or even a reproduction hood will fit on it. Maybe it won't all fit perfectly, but it'll still fit pretty good. Now when they've been recored, sometimes the dimensions are a little bit altered, not everything fits just right. With the reproduction ones, also, sometimes you can run into alignment problems. Not to discredit reproduction radiators though, I am grateful they are available. I'm grateful that you can buy your way out of this problem if you have to. And even some of the worst ones I've seen, you can still make them work. The problem is, even the nicest, cleanest original radiator is still over 100 years old, and some of the brass radiators are over 110 years old. So, they're pretty much at the end of their life. The original cores are a lot more heavy duty because they're made to last longer, but they can only last so long. So, usually every couple of months there's a new leak in them somewhere, you're constantly patching them back together, but this is my decision anyway, and it works for me. So looking closely at the core, I don't know if you can see it, but it's actually been patched. There's some patch fins in here that have been soldered in, which is actually a Ford authorized repair. There's instructions in the repair manual on how to do that. Other than that, it looks pretty clean. Well, one thing to watch out for with these is these fins are actually soldered to the tubes. Now these are still tight. If I move them around, they don't move freely from the tubes. But if they detach and start moving freely, what happens is corrosion starts building up around them, and that really decreases their heat transfer. They don't cool quite as well. And if they're doing that, they can be prone to overheating. This one is not doing that. Yeah, they're all still pretty solid, so this is a good one. It should still work for quite some time. And while it's this far apart, we need to do something about the fan. Because it's loose. Looks like that blade is broken off and has been welded back on. And the mounting bracket has been hacked up. Why, I don't know. I have one that I already rebuilt for this, but that ended up going on the touring car, so I'm going to take it back off that. And while I have it this far apart, I'm also going to install an aftermarket water pump. Now this is some kind of, I don't know, 1920s aftermarket part. It doesn't have a brand name on it or anything, but I went through it, made a new shaft for it out of stainless steel, bought a new pulley, put new packing in it, and it's ready to go. Now when it comes to aftermarket water pumps, Model T owners are actually quite divided with their opinions about these, with some saying, yeah, they're necessary to make it more drivable on today's roads, and others saying they don't need it, they didn't need it then, they never needed it, and they sure don't need it now. My own personal opinion, based on my own experience, is the stock thermal siphon cooling system actually does work, surprisingly. It shouldn't. It laughs in the face of physics, but it works. Somehow the coolant can sense a temperature difference and knows when to circulate. Neither of these cars have water pumps on them, and neither one of them have ever tried to overheat. I think the truck kind of did a while ago, but it doesn't anymore. However, I'm going to install this anyway for two reasons. First of all, I've read in various articles over the years that even though the coolant does circulate heat, it doesn't really fully circulate throughout the engine. There are some spots where the coolant just sits or doesn't move very much, which can cause hot spots. It can also cause the additives in the coolant to start separating, and with nothing forcing it to move, there's nothing to mix it back up again. Which makes logical sense. I don't know anyone has ever scientifically proven it with any real data to go on, but it does make sense. And on something like the truck, where it's somewhat heavy, and I carry stuff with it, I drive it in the summer, I've even driven it on the freeway a few times, it might be pushing the cooling system pretty hard, and if this can eliminate hot spots or at least deter them, it's a benefit. I don't plan to ever install a water pump on the touring car, however, because I'm trying to keep that as authentic in appearance and function as I can. Besides, I don't really beat that car all that hard when I drive it anyway. The other reason, and I know this from experience, is if you pour a bottle of stop leak in the radiator, it all just goes right to the bottom tank and sits there. And the only thing it seals is the drain valve. If you want it to actually circulate throughout the cooling system and seal off and mix in like it should, you need some kind of pump forcing it to do so. And that radiator's been behaving itself, but I'm sure at some point I'm going to end up putting a bottle of stop leak in it anyway. However, if this thing ends up being a problem, if it starts leaking or anything like that, I'm taking it back off. But for now, it's going on. Here's a tech tip. The gaskets that you use a lot, like manifolds, water inlet, water outlet, oil drain plug, buy like 10 of them in a shot and just put them on the shelf so you always have one in stock when you need it. That way you won't have to make one every time you need it like I do. So here's the shell now, sitting on the proper radiator. Now there's quite a few things we had to do to it. Now before, somebody had this trimmed off right about here, and they had these added to it, which were about there, and they were riveted on. So I had to make a patch panel for that. Same thing on the other side. And this lower apron is a new reproduction one. I did have to trim a little flashing off the edges and add the choke hole. Other than that, that's the way it came out of the box. So that's a pretty good product. Also, the sides of the shell were pushed out to fit the bigger radiator. This side was cracked. We had to shrink that down a little bit and fix that. Same with the other side, but not so bad. And it was notched out on this corner. On this side too. We're going to have to make a patch panel for that. But it's coming along. Now you may be wondering, there's not exactly a shortage of these shells out there. Why are we going through so much trouble to fix this one? Well, this is why. This part right here. Because although these shells are pretty easy to find, you can't always find these in good shape. The Ford script is usually the edges are rounded off from people sanding or grinding this. This is still pretty sharp. And what's even more rare is the stamped Made in USA underneath it. These are almost always gone. They're just rust pitted away, or they're so shallow you can't even see it. This one is like new. So just because of that, that's worth saving the shell. I mean, even if I had to, I would just take this piece off and transfer it to another shell if I had to, but it's actually not too much work. And the radiator shell's now done. I got it painted. That's the way that looks finished. The lower apron is welded on, but it's supposed to have 2 rivets on it, so I added them just for fun. That's the patch panel, but you can't really tell now. And the best news is the Made in USA is still clearly visible. And as long as I've gone this far, may as well install new hood lacing, because aesthetically this makes a huge difference when it's done. Another thing I'm going to add is this, which I homemade, a piece of steel tube with a pipe fitting, so I can attach a coolant temp gauge. And we have it back together. I filled it with coolant. It's not leaking yet, so we're going to start it up and make sure everything still works. Another tech tip is, after working on the fan or the radiator, before starting it up, it's a good idea to just spin the engine over by hand to make sure the fan isn't touching anything. Because that's another lesson I had to learn the hard way. And after about 2 minutes of running, the temp gauge reads nothing, which I expect. There would be something really wrong with it if it warmed up by then. And it all still works. The water pump isn't leaking yet, so for now that's staying on. I'm not going to test drive it because I already know the radiator works, and there's a bunch of other stuff I want to work on also. But I finally have the front of this looking right. Back when it had the wrong radiator, it was too tall, it was leaning forward, and the shell was all hacked up to fit it. It just looked terrible, and it bothered me for a few years. And it also bothered me that I had to explain to everyone why it looks the way it does and why I'm not doing anything about it, because I knew it was going to cost money and be a lot of work to fix it. And it's still not done yet. I still need to align the hood. Actually, I need to find a complete hood and align that. This is the old hood top, but even this fits a lot better. It fits like it's made for it, because it is. So I feel a lot better about that. The front of the car and the lines around here, it's all the way it should be now, and it goes with itself. The next big thing to worry about is the firewall. That's got a few problems. I've got some parts for it, but I think this video is long enough already, so that'll probably be the next video. Anyway, that's it for now. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.